Hi everybody, this is Patrick from the 8TrackTapeStore.com, and what we're going to talk about in this video is tape tension. It's a difficult topic, whereas the rest of the videos we've done, there tends to be scientific, straightforward, black and white answers to how you do splices and pads and respooling stuff. With tape tension, it's more of an art and there's more of a feel for it. So hopefully what I'm going to do in the next few minutes is just show you some basics and some examples, some rules of thumb on how to deal with tape tension to get you started in the right direction. We could spend an hour on this topic and we still wouldn't have covered all of what you would want to know, but let's get started. So when you have a tape open and you're turning it like this, you want this inner lead to freely come off the spool. So you see this is coming off very easily. It's not getting caught up in the center. Whereas if we look at this tape, and I turn it, do you see how this inner lead is trying to make its way around the spool rather than just coming off easily? I will straighten that out, but the problem doesn't go away. It's because there's too much tightness in this tape, or it's spread unevenly. I think it's spread unevenly because when I look in the tape spool, I see a gap here. And that's a gap that is probably, a turn or two of loops that we want to really rejuvenate into the tape. So the way I get that gap out, there's a couple of approaches. The easiest way, if it works, is to just hold this with your finger and start tightening the loop. And that one actually came out. And now we have a little extra slack to play with. So what we're going to do is add a loop back in the middle. We're going to take it off and then put it back on. And we'll do it again. Take it off and put it back on. You want your inner loop by the hub to be really light so that it's going to come off freely. So that should probably spin now. So you see the difference. This isn't perfect. I can see it's still a little rough coming off, and another gap has formed here. So when that happens, and you can't really pull it out from the outside, what we do is we put the spool on our universal servicing cart. I'm going to tighten as best I can here. And what we're going to do to try to eliminate this gap, I hope you can see it on the tape, is to apply our drill. And so I'm going to apply the drill. What the drill does, in addition to being very fast at finding splices and such, is it will distribute the tension evenly throughout the tape. So when your drill's on low torque, you will hear the motor and feel it kind of speeding up and slowing down as it's adjusting tension kind of miraculously in the tape. It's a really good way to spread your tension easily. It's not just for speed that we use it, but it's going to go in here, and we're just going to turn that. Sometimes this happens. We'll add that loop back on, kind of lighten it up on the inside, the tension. That back around there. And we'll keep going until we see that this little gap here that's in the spool has been driven out by the drill. And that's actually pretty good. There's a dark spot here, probably where the splice is, but the gap is gone. So you can see this is now turning very freely. So that has really fixed the tension on the loop or on the spool. We're still going to go find the splice and we're going to replace it and all that. But as far as tension, this tape is fine right now. Another thing you want, in addition to this coming out freely, is you don't want to be able to remove a whole bunch of slack from the outside. So on this tape, I've removed, like, I don't know, a loop or two of slack. So the way we would get rid of that is by finding the splice. And then once you've found the splice, you're going to replace it. And that's the time. Here's a tape that's ready for splice repair. That's the time to add the loops back or remove the loops. If your loops are too tight, you're going to want to add or remove loops in the tape. So this is the way it would be if we were not going to add any loops, but you can see that this tape could use a loop or two. So we're just going to add them that way. Then we will replace the splice. This tape needs a little ironing. But let's just pretend we replaced the splice. Then we're going to put the loops back on the way they came off, just by turning them back on into the center. And by the same token, if your tape was a little tight, and let's say you found the splice and there were 3 loops like that, you cut the splice and there you have your 3 loops. Well, you can remove a loop at this time if you wanted to. You just take it out that way, replace the splice, and now you have 2 loops to put back on the center. So as far as evening out the tension, those are ways we use to eliminate the gaps, spread the tension evenly, and then add a loop or remove a loop as is necessary. Generally, we might add loops to tape more than removing them. So often, we're going to encounter a tape and it still has the factory splice in it. Those factory splices, those tapes, normally have the correct amount of loops in them already. They were done at the factory. So you're just going to replace the splice and put the loops back on the way they were. Sometimes the tapes get dirty over time. They might have little micro dust particles that have settled, and sometimes the viscosity on the backside of the tape is a little rough or worn, and those are the kinds of times you want to remove a loop or two from a tape to get it to play better. We showed you in the video on respooling that's a good candidate for respooling when you have a dirty tape. Kind of airs everything out, and once you've respooled, you'll have the right amount of loops back in when you put the splice back together. There's other ways to get a little extra slack in the tape if you want to use it. So these types of tapes route around the back post. They don't have to. So if your tape is a little bit tight in tension, what you can do is just take it off the back post, and now you have maybe a turn of extra slack now that you can just put on the tape if you need to. And that's sort of a quick way to kind of loosen the tension slightly on a tape if you need to. This will play fine this way. By the same token, this type of tape will route around one post there. Doesn't have to. You can slide that down. You get a little bit of a slack that way. Not much, but sometimes it's enough to have your tape tension properly. This tape here, one of the things you want to do, I mentioned, this should slide off the center very easily. This one does, but every tape you want to also do a little tug on the left side. And if you see the tape just coming out too much, this is another one that has about 1 extra loop that we would want to, it's missing 1 loop, I should say. And we would want to maybe add that loop in when we replace the splice. Let's see if I've covered everything. We talked about gaps, uneven tapes, We talked about tapes with a few loops, and we talked about tapes with mini loops. And most of the tension problems we encounter are usually when someone has replaced a splice before us, and invariably they will remove loops for some reason and the tape is too loose. Sometimes they'll add loops that shouldn't be there and the tape is too tight, but it's usually not that way. But anyway, I think this is enough to get you started on understanding how to deal with tension issues in your tapes. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments or reach out to us at the 8TrackTapeStore.com. This is Patrick from the 8TrackTapeStore.com. Thank you.